Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, where everything you're about to hear and see has been done in one take. I'm your host, the One Take Man. In today's video, the last of this month, I'll be concluding the video theme that I've had running throughout this month, where I talked about TV, about pitching various TV series that I've had floating through my brain for a few years. And I'll be closing it out with a twofer, where I talk about two potential such series. One that would follow on the mythology surrounding King Arthur, and one that will follow they'll follow the narrative compendium or the collection of stories that have been told about Robin Hood. It is somewhat fitting to talk about these two characters together because, in some respects, they both represent the ways in which the English specifically and the Anglosphere more broadly understands itself. Either as a righteous leader who governs wisely and always knows what the right thing to do is in any given situation, including using violence if need be, or as an opponent of immoral or unjust laws, someone who fights against the abuses of those in power, as well as comforts those who have been, as well as comforts those who have been the victims of said abuse, stealing from the rich to give to the poor, if you'll recall. Both of these characters represent an important facet within the broader understanding, or within the broader self-understanding of of the people within these particular cultural spheres, as representations of order in King Arthur's case, or freedom in the case of Robin Hood's case. And I can safely say that that these amalgamations, or that these frames of mind, are mirrored within the ways in which these characters and their stories are adapted as well. With King Arthur, for example, tending to have more documentaries following the truth behind the myth, maybe, for example, or if there are like more serious adaptations, so to speak, they tend to focus more upon the various honor and legacy systems that would have dominated medieval courtly politics, or rather, medieval high society drama. It's still, they can still go into the fantastical on occasion, but even when going into the fantastical, the series still has a serious tone and follows more the uh, gravitas, the significance, and the legacy of both the various characters that the audience is supposed to follow, but also of their actions and the consequences that these actions would go on to have. Robin Hood, by contrast, is allowed to not be burdened by legacy. His stories tend to be a lot more free spirited, a lot more focused on adventure, and in many ways be an outright rejection of the pageantry and honors that would have defined medieval high society, instead placing the well-being of the average citizen as the as the greatest good. And because of that, because of this outright defiance, he has to some extent become one of the original swashbuckling characters, as defined by performances of the likes of Douglas Fairbanks and Errol Flynn. Now, don't get me wrong. I think both of these approaches not only can work, but very much have worked. I mean, keep in mind that these characters are not just almost a millennium old by this point, but hey, they have been adapted to visual media several times, several times a generation, ever since film first existed. So they do strike a chord in that sense, in the ways in which they are presented. Because they do allow for their audiences to resonate with them. However, these are still adaptations, and they still only look at a fraction, a certain a certain subsegment of the of the stories following these characters, and there is more to look into when it comes to their respective stories, and when it comes to the ways that various people interact with these characters. There has, I think it's fair to say that there has been that plenty of time has passed since their first adaptations, that that a marked difference in how they are adapted and how they are presented would make would allow them to would allow them to better resonate and become more more meaningful within the current cultural climate. Uh, and that is what my particular, what the approaches I'll be talking about throughout this video aim to focus upon. These approaches are not entirely new, but they are underexplored. and my idea is to take the ways in which these characters are typically approached and switch them around. As in, I want to have Robin Hood be the more serious franchise, covering gritty aspects of medieval political drama, and have King Arthur be be the franchise or the intellectual property that tackles more tackles more whimsical adventures. This is not, as I've said, a new idea. In fact, if you'll remember the the 2010 Robin Hood movie starring Russell Crowe, that also had a grittier, more realistic, and down to earth approach towards the towards the Robin Hood mythos, and it also did a pretty interesting job in weaving in the historical context of the character, with mentions of King John and the Magna Carta. A lot of people dismissed that movie because they thought it was too dark and not fun, as though that's all a Robin Hood movie is supposed to be, a particular kind of fun. But regardless of what you may think of that movie, my personal opinion towards about its end is that it establishes a very interesting status quo for any future Robin Hood adaptation, namely that of the titular character and his merry men forming a proto-communist resistance movement against against an unjust monarchy. The question really comes from how the narrative potential that this setup creates can be materialized. In order to answer that question, I am looking at I'm going to be looking at another serious adaptation from the early 2010s of a property that was primarily known for swashbuckling adventures as reference, and that particular property would be that particular series would be BBC's The Musketeers, which in its own way managed to take the characters and various attributes of the Dumas story and was able to adapt them within a historically plausible setting and world, but while still keeping the sense of humor and spirit of adventure that the original held. And that is really what a future Robin Hood series should also be capable of doing, retaining the broad strokes of who the characters are, supposed to be, or of who the lead characters are supposed to be, but while making the world around them more, perhaps a little bit more. Perhaps a little bit more cynical, a little bit more historically, not necessarily authentic, but plausible. Like the impressions they would have to, the impressions these these environments would leave on most people would have to come across as authentic to the audience. And I think a good step towards towards establishing this particular status quo lies in how the show would adapt Friar Tuck. some of you might think it's easy because because of the past, just make him comic relief like everyone else, or maybe have him be the medic of the team, because that's also something that occurs from time to time. But if you look at Tuck more specifically, particularly the fact that he is a friar, aka a member of the clergy, the primary administrative apparatus of a medieval society, you realize that his role within this resistance movement is actually invaluable as a man inside, someone who can supply the rest of the rest of the cell with uh, uh, or who can supply them with resources, information, as well as potentially various services or access to services. Be that as a medic, be that as a be that from a logistical perspective, be that from or be that through uh, uh, encoding or encrypting, decoding, decrypting, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's so yeah. He can still play the fool if need be. However, the important thing is he has to play the fool, as in he has to appear to be foolish. But the audience needs to know it's an act. He needs to know it's an act, and some, if not all, of his comrades should also know that it is that it is an act. That is and yeah that is And that is what I would build the remainder of the series around. As for the King Arthur adaptation, my points of reference when it comes to it are King Arthur and the Knights of Justice, a pre-Power Rangers Saban animated series that very heavily leaned into the supernatural or fantastical aspects of the King Arthur mythos, and kind of low-key served as an early inspiration for what Power Rangers would eventually become. And BBC's Merlin, which, even though it initially started out as a more as a more somber and more dignified series that they tried to focus on stuff like and try to focus on themes of duty and legacy. It is nowadays primarily known for yaoi bait, and that is something that I think any future King Arthur adaptation should be able to pick up and run with. Not necessarily lean into homosexuality and play around with what it means to be a man, or or any other kind of postmodern gender nonsense, as some people might call it. But I do want this show to focus a little bit more on the affection, the friendship, and the support that the characters the audience would follow would have for each other. And I don't just mean King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. I also want to include their supporting cast in this in this constellation of we're all in this together. Let's go let's go out and do amazing stuff. And that amazing stuff would primarily just be wacky, zany, outlandish, whimsical adventures, with a lot of the but you can still have the pettiness of quarterly medieval drama around as flavor, to serve partly a comedic purpose, partly to serve as setup for future villains and future adventures and stories. Because while King Arthur and Knights of the Round Table is nowadays viewed as primarily as a story of heroism, if you actually look at the original stories, you'll realize that they are a little bit more morally gray than they might have been painted as being. Because these characters, when they were created, they weren't really archetypes or paragons or role models. They were just people. They were just a bunch of well-trained enforcers who saw themselves somewhere on the scale between guardians and adventurers, and the particular discrepancies between them fueled a lot of conflict, not just between themselves, but also when it came to how they dealt with external factions, and it is really through these and really it is through these dealings that the world, that the world itself would come to life, and also become more dynamic, more conflict driven. So in that sense, by taking away the facts of, the parts of these lies that make them paragons, I'm in many ways bringing them back to their roots, and making them more uh, authentic to the original myths. Again, that's one potential interpretation. It's one that I personally think works. You may think differently. But anyway, that was my presentation for how I think these particular shows could unfold. Thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed it, well then please like the video, maybe even share it wherever you think other people will also like the video. If there is anything you'd like to add, either to my, either to the concepts that these, that these shows would have, or to, or to my particular pitches, that is what the comment section is for. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe. And ideally also ring the bell, or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. I also have a main channel where I talk about the print medium and selected works therein, so if you are at all interested in my thoughts on that particular topic, you can check it out in the description down below, right past my social media links, which I would suggest you check out should you choose to. If you are less than interested in my thoughts on the print medium, then I suggest you stay on this channel, where you can go for my extensive backlog of TV series as well as movie pitches, but also reviews and retrospectives, not just of TV series and movies, but also of video games, music albums, and as well as a variety of other content, depending on what it is that I want to make in that particular week. And yeah, that would be it. If, however, you don't find that to be interesting either, then I suggest you go ahead and do whatever you want the rest of your day, because it is your day after all. And yeah, now I'm done. That was it for me. So until next time, I have been the One Take Man.